Real Peace, brought to you by Kwabi&thePeaceCampaign, is a podcast dedicated to discovering ways in which everyday people can learn about community, seek understanding of self and others, and gain tolerance on opinions they might not agree with. How do we learn to live together? How do we learn to love each other? These questions and much, much more we will attempt to answer only on Real Peace. My name is Kwabi, and I'm your host. And behind the camera is our producer, Kevin Wolford. And without him, none of this would be possible. Across the room from me is our co-host, Wesley Mungol, who's a pharmacist and supporter of the Peace Campaign. And today, we're going to be talking about understanding and comprehending aspects of self-talk. Can we use self-talk, positive self-talk to benefit our self-image? And what are the detriments of negative self-talk? Today we have two awesome guests. First guest is Jessica Barba, who is a child psychiatric counselor. Can you explain to the folks at home what is that?
So essentially I work at a residential treatment center for children and adolescents who are a harm to themselves and others.
Ooh, it's tough. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then also we have Mark Carvajal, who is a counselor therapist. How's it going, guys? How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Good?
Yeah.
Traffic getting here? No?
It wasn't too bad.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Let's get into the nitty gritty, man.
Okay, yeah, nitty grit. Cool. So, self-talk, to me, I'm not well versed with the subject. All I know is, for me, if I keep on reiterating positive things, I'll eventually exude those thoughts in action. And so, like, when I'm going about my day and I'm feeling like, if I feel bad, if I tell myself, Kwabi, just think positive thoughts. Keep on thinking about nice things. Eventually, I'll feel better about myself. Is that, do you guys agree with that sort of premise? With using self-talk, or?
I would agree. I think one of the bigger parts is identifying that you're not having positive self-talk, because you might be having negative self-talk and not even know it and think it's normal. So I think being mindful and paying attention to your thoughts in the first place is the first thing to pay attention to.
How do you get? So you deal with a lot of kids, right? Mm-hmm. So essentially you address, like, you document their behaviors and all that stuff. So if you see a kid is engaging in negative self-talk, like, how do you spot it? Like, what does it sound like to you?
You see, where I work at, it's literally like in your face. I literally have patients like saying, "I f***ing hate myself."
The kids, 5-year-old kids,
like 6. We work with 6 to 17-year-olds, and
wow.
I didn't mean to cuss,
but
they're literally like banging their heads on the floor. I hate myself. I want to die. Kill me now.
That's negative self-talk.
Definitely negative.
So when that's happening now, like, what's the protocol to, like?
Well, depending on how escalated they are, what we like to do is trying to bring them down to baseline. Every patient has a different baseline, so it's really tailored. So it just all depends. Some kids really good days, like somebody's really bad day. So it just depends. But
are these kids orphans or?
No. Okay. We have kids from all types of backgrounds and demographics.
Didn't you say there's like only 3 facilities like the one you work at in the United States?
Yep. There's one in Washington, in Texas, and in New York.
Good.
Long-term residential treatment center.
Damn.
Or hospital.
So the parents, correct me if I'm wrong, the parents like drop them off and then they're in your guys' care.
Yeah, basically. But they have to be diagnosed, and they have to go through like social workers and psychologists and psychiatrists. So it's like a process. It's not like my kid's a handful. I can't.
Gotcha. I can't deal with.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. So here, let's maybe you can chime in. If to me, there's a difference between negative self-talk if it's genuine negative self-talk, and then there's negative self-talk as in they're using it to get attention from people.
Yeah. So I also see that too. So usually I think that the self-talk that, like, your own personal dialogue within yourself, that low self-esteem, just kind of like pessimistic type of narrative is a reflection of their behavior for that attention to get either validation, like, yeah, I'm a piece of crap, or help me, I'm a piece of crap. So that's the way I kind of see it.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But that's just the way I see it.
And what about you, Mark? Like, with your patients or who you help?
Yeah, I think like you're saying, the being mindful that it's happening is an important skill to be able to possess. And I think more than positive self-talk, it's more kind of a well, I guess in the therapy realm, we call it reframing, right? So that something is not black or white. It's called black or white thinking, all or nothing thinking, but that there's complexities to it. And a lot of times, if we can see that there's complexities to the way we feel, there can be relief. If we can see that there's alternate views, there can be relief, even if that's negative. If there's a nuanced degree of negativity to it, there can be relief, I think.
So, okay, if someone's going through a very, very difficult, arduous time, right? That, like, okay, maybe, you know, God forbid, but everyone in their family dies. How do they go about instilling positive talk when their world isn't positive at the time? You know, what does that even look like? Like, I'm alive and therefore I should be happy?
Well, okay. So in order to answer that question, right? I was gonna ask you guys, what are exercises that you guys have that either the kids do or your patients do to get them to be mindful of what they're saying, right?
Okay.
So let me break this down, right? Now, to what you're saying, for me, people don't realize how negative towards themselves they are, right? So it becomes harmful in terms of their behavior, or they shut down, or depression, all that stuff, right? So what are, like, I remember how I developed it, because I like to write, I journal. But how do you get, you know, what are some ways to engage people to understanding that, hey, what I'm doing here is negative self-talk?
Well,
Yeah.
go for it.
Oh, you.
Well, I think a big part of that is being able to stay present and keep track, because when you're journaling, you're present in that moment, and you're writing, and you're with your thoughts, and you're tracking them down. And deep breathing is another great way of staying present. And
What was it? Deep breathing?
Deep breathing exercises.
Deep breathing. Oh, okay.
Yeah, deep breathing techniques is something that we do a lot to keep them grounded.
And that helps with anxiety as well, you know?
Yeah, just all
anger.
types of, yeah, deep breathing helps out with a lot. But what I was going to say was, because of journaling and deep breathing and being able to stay present with the mindfulness, I think that a big part of the negative part is kind of being like an investigator and questioning your thoughts, because you are not your thoughts.
You are not your thoughts.
Okay, so now we're getting into some high level stuff. Like, okay, what like our exercises? Is there anything besides the journaling and the deep breathing?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to try to answer both the questions you asked. So yours was about the mindfulness, and yours was an example of someone that is going through a lot of grief. Everything's going wrong. Yeah. And so it made me think. I work with a client that was hit on his bicycle and has a dislocated pelvis, and is now living with his parents, can't move very well. And is on top of that, his parents are saying, people have it worse than you. Some people have no legs, right? Not what he wants to hear. So they're trying to be positive and give him a reframe, and he's just not really ready to hear it. So in that same way, there's a certain period of adjustment and adaptation where things are just going to be bad. And so that might be the kind of staying with someone in that is sort of the reframe, which is to stay with it.
I don't think helping, like saying like, oh, it could be worse, really doesn't help in any circumstance. I mean, I feel like that's not empathy.
Yeah, okay. But if you peel away the layers of that, right? Because my dad did that all the time to me. You know, you could be in Afghanistan or this or that, right? True. Nothing against Afghanistan. Yeah. But for me, what he was really trying to do was to practice gratitude, to get me to practice gratitude, right? As in, like, Wes, wake up and be thankful that you're not in some country where, you know, it's lawless or la, right?
And you can use those as for self-talk, and
right, and you can build on that, right? So once you have gratitude now, then you're like now you're like, hey, it's not that bad, right?
Gotcha.
But so you were gonna speak to a second part.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good point. So with gratitude, if we were to take your example, if someone were to be like, okay, yeah, all this death happened to you, but what are you grateful for? It would be difficult for them to find that. So one way of staying with that is one way of addressing it is to stay with them in what they're going through. So it might be with education, literature. Who else has talked about the really difficult period of grief that people go through? Iris Murdoch was a wonderful writer, and she said that grief is love's unwillingness to let go. Another person's view on what grief is, right? All these things to sort of try to stay with it.
Gotcha.
You know,
You see, the challenge with that, right? The grief is the unwillingness of love to let go, right? That's a hot button thing for me because at some point you have to cast aside useless thinking, right? Because it's not conducive to anything positive at all.
Which is not necessarily synonymous with negative thinking to the extent,
Yeah, but to me, it's denial. It's human denial, doubt, or willingness to reinforce a bias, right? Like a negative bias, right?
Okay.
So the whole point of like positive self-talk, right? And you see it manifest like in books like The Secret. You guys ever heard of that stuff? Like positive self-imagery, right? Now, to me, if you look at, like I saw this neuroscientist, right? And he said, what happens is when you start saying positive things, you create a bias in your head, right?
Okay.
So now you're open and you keep finding things to keep reaffirming that bias, it puts you down that certain path.
Gotcha.
Right. Whereas when you have a negative talk, right, or like you
find confirmation for that as well.
Yeah, you find confirmation for that, and you keep yourself low.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. The one thing I want to ask you guys though is that, like, in terms of your perception of who you are and in your looks, right, and how attractive you perceive yourself to be, right? How does the self-talk in that work in that mechanism?
Well, I mean, even the prettiest person is gonna have their days where they feel unattractive.
But how do you know that though?
Well, I don't, Wes. I'm making a guess based on my own conjecture. But I'm thinking that, at some point someone says for example, Brad Pitt. I know Brad Pitt has videos online where people have commented like, oh, yeah, he's ugly or something. And relatively in the public, he's known to be a good-looking person. And for him and for anyone else, looking for inner beauty is very important. And not focusing so much on the outward appearance, will help to, I guess, balance out your idea of.
See, I don't buy that.
No?
Right? No, because I think that's like one of those you should
Everyone's
have
pretty.
right?
Everyone is pretty.
It's just
on the inside.
So what would when have you guys ever come across patients that have negative self-talk with regards to how they look?
Well, this wasn't a patient, but or a client, but what you're talking about reminds me of this short story by Joyce Carol Oates, and it's called Ugly. And a girl is talking about how different she's treated, and she's really kind of feeling sorry for herself through a lot of the story because she doesn't think that she's attractive. And I kept thinking, reading that, does that really happen? That I could understand to a certain degree if there are maybe major deformities or things like that, but if someone has maybe not conventionally attractive features and if they really get stuck on that so much, if for no other reason of the phenomenon that we're often not seeing our own selves, what would life be different if we saw a mirror, if we had a rear view mirror on our shoulders that was genetically attached? But anyway, so I wonder if that really
I don't know, but some of the things that, like, when you look yourself in the mirror, right, let's just say, like, so where I work, right, I'll have patients come in, right, and they're asking me for like some acne treatment, right, and I'm looking at them and I don't see what they're talking, their face looks clear to me, right, and they'll be like, no man, you don't see it, it's like right here. right? And I have to look and squint, right? But what I could tell, like what I think is going on, I'm not in their head, but what I think is going on, the way they're asking questions and how insecure they're coming off, they're zooming in on that when they look at themselves in the mirror.
Gotcha. It's the same thing with sort of like the bodybuilder syndrome when like you're lifting and you think you could be bigger, but you're already big. And
like
then
you.
Yeah, but like, hey, but what I'm getting at
Way
is,
to bring it to that all the time.
I know, right? Got to bring it home. No, I'm not like that. what I'm saying is, I mean, it's similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's the Eastern idea kind of it's easy to see the world as a nail if all you have is a hammer. The kind of zoning in. And it's also what you're saying, very much like the Clear Cell commercial reminds me of. When he goes, came out in 1982.
Gotcha.
When goes, hey, you use Clear Cell, but you don't have acne. Exactly.
See,
story.
that's the thing, right?
But I mean,
I'm glad that I remember that.
maybe I
That's
shouldn't
useful.
case it in this format, but not all negative talk, self-talk is a hindrance. I mean, to some regard, we use negative or cautious self-talk to protect ourselves, to keep ourselves aware. Like if you cross the street, I mean, if you're thinking completely positive, like there's no cars in the road, I'll be fine. You cross the street, car comes out and hits you. But to be aware and to be cautious is important as well.
Recently, I've been really interested in this idea that's kind of loosely related to what you're talking about. That's been researched here and there about the fact that when we remember previous things that have happened to us in our lives, we're more likely to remember negative things because it takes more processing. Or if something is good that has happened to you, it's kind of just good. There's not a lot of
Interesting.
processing that you have to do.
That's sad.
Protect
Well, yeah, but
ourselves.
so if something negative happens, right, like a car accident, right, it's a visceral, psychological experience, right? So when that happens, I was reading something about like to what you were saying, like about neuroplasticity. So one of the things they talk about is like if you're trying to remember something, encode it with like scent. Like if you're studying, right?
Gotcha.
Smell. It's like an orange, or like have a certain music playing in the background. So when you are learning or reading, you're getting a visual cue, a sense, the scent, and then your audio cue, right?
Yeah.
So maybe if it's a negative experience, like there's something to it, because now you're encoding it with such a powerful thing. What you were saying with the negative stuff, there's a difference between beneficial, like stepping back, like maybe you need to, talk yourself back from something that's a stupid idea.
Yeah.
But there's that, and then there's like where it's like pathological, where you're just like, oh man, I'm so ugly at this, and
Gotcha.
So that's, to me, I think there's a difference
I see.
between that.
Well, look at in the phenomenon of learning. You look at, not to throw a bunch of studies, but the well-known Kruger and Dunn effect. Where it's kind of essentially saying that people that are really learning well and that are advanced are able to see a lot of the holes in their learning, right? So that would technically be negative. If I'm really struggling to learn, I have to be honest with myself in order to progress. Right, it might not be pretty.
Well, I think that's a part of intelligence too, like having doubt. Like, hey, do I really know this? Right?
Gotcha.
What do you think about this in the social context of negative self-talk? Right? Do you want to really be around somebody who's always down on themselves?
No.
Exactly. Look at that face.
No one does.
I mean, like if I met a girl that was constantly saying like, oh my God, I'm not skinny enough or I'm not pretty enough, I'm going to be like, okay, look, I can't help you, I don't know what to tell you,
That's true.
So if you have these young kids that you're working with, the ones that honestly, they're maybe not trying to get attention, and I don't know how you decipher that out because I don't work with kids, but how do you approach that? It's just so hard to hear that would happen at such a young age.
So with patients that have negative self-talk, we kind of like to emphasize the things that they are good at and just basically try to rewrite that script, that narrative, that inner narrative that we constantly have with us. and just rewrite it. And back to the whole mindfulness, you got to keep track of your thoughts. And that's we the main theoretical orientation that they practice there is DBT, and DBT involves a lot of mindfulness. So we try to encourage them to be mindful and keep track of what they're thinking and what they're saying through journaling, deep breathing, grounding techniques, things like that. So we like to, especially, it's easy to bring out the good things in individuals who have negative self-talk when they're in that negative space. So we have to constantly remind them when they're doing good. Because of that negative self-talk, they can't recognize when they're doing good. So you have to kind of like bring that mirror out, like, hey, you're not as bad as you think you are.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not as bad as you think you are, right? So what do you?
Some of you guys are awful.
Right, no. Because I agree with that. I think a lot of people are, one, not as bad as they think they are. Two, they're more attractive than they give themselves credit for, right? So okay, like I in a social context, like if your friends, like you're really close friends, like if they're getting into it and they're hard on themselves, like what do?
Well, you don't tell them lies. You be truthful. But at the same time, I'd probably relay like positive attributes about them that they may not have realized before, and sort of like use that to boost them up.
And I think that's important, right? Because your friends help you regain your self-esteem sometimes.
I'm not gonna lie. One time you told me that I was better looking than Idris Elba. I'll never forget that. And though it's not true,
whoa.
though it's not true,
I just think you have very attractive facial features.
Thank you, Wes. I appreciate it.
Let's not get carried away here.
Yeah, but though it's not true, I held on to that, and it was it was a piece that helped me in positivity and my self-image.
I think that's an important point. One of the things that I did for a while, I guess it kind of falls under affirmations, and maybe it's a little cheesy, but for a while, if I was having low self-esteem day or something, I would close my eyes and make a montage in my mind of all the times people have given me a compliment that is really
that's a great strategy.
Wow, that is
and
good.
It helps. It helps a lot.
Do you guys think that like setting apart a day where you wake up and you focus on one, like, I have eyes, and you focus on the fact that you have eyes, you can see, or that you can speak, simple things, reiterating that and constantly, reinforcing that can help in boosting up your positivity?
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Here's the thing. I don't take cold shower or warm showers for granted. Every day, like, where I'm from in Trinidad, up until the age of 8, 9, we took cold showers. Wow. Right? We didn't have hot water. So when that was like one of the allure things of America.
America.
So like for me, if I wake up and I get to take a nice warm shower, that is something I'm incredibly grateful. It's something I don't ever forget. So like, yes, I think, and then once you start the day off like that, you're grateful for something as small as it can be. I think it puts you in a good path, for the day. Like what you just said, like you go back and listen to what other people have said, right? Let's just say you're down on yourself, right? Third person perspective, right? That's a really validating thing. Not that you're looking for validation, but it does help to cycle through that.
It also goes both ways, because you do have the positive reinforcement from others, but that kind of gives your inner self-talk a boost. But then what if you have people giving you negative things? And that's where
you gotta cut them.
No.
But what if you can't cut them?
Okay, so that's huge, because I've had personal experience with this.
Who do you listen to?
Yeah, who do you like? Because people in my close circle, they'll tell me things. They used to, and because I was very loyal to them and they were my friends and stuff like that. I would believe it. But at the end of the day, you're responsible for what's in your head.
Gotcha.
Right? So, it took me a while to get over that.
I'm gonna ask one question before we start wrapping things up. Why do you guys think positivity, when people exude it, that it's so addictive and people cling to positivity? Why is that?
Well, I mean,
coming from my own
stance. If I was around somebody who is negative versus somebody who is positive, I would feel more secure
Okay.
being next to a positive person. I would also enjoy my time more and see and appreciate things more and see things through their perspective. And I think that's the addicting quality, being able to see life through that like happy lens that we're all conditioned and forced to see through, because life isn't always happy.
True.
And that's where radical acceptance needs to come in. None of us can practice that sometimes. So.
Yeah, that's more optimistic than my answer. I think that because it sells in a way. You know, we're inundated with a society where it sells to not think about the negative, and people want to hear about the positive.
Gotcha.
Whereas, in fact, I think there's personally, this is my bent, you know, that there's a lot to be learned from the negative. And these are sweeping generalizations like negative and positive, but
for the record, everything I've said is a sweeping generalization.
Yeah,
Please don't hold me to
it. Yeah. I go back. I always use this example, and it's very simple, but I use it with clients. And Russell Wilson, if I think of you, it was last year, he was injured, I think in like the third game or something. And it was like, I think it was last year, and he hurt his ankle and he couldn't really even throw, and he wasn't even out that much. I don't even think he missed a game. He kind of went back in, they taped it up. And then, but by the next game, he was playing and making amazing throws. In the press conference afterwards, one of the interviewers asked him, "Are you just a modern miracle of medicine?" And he looked at the interviewer and goes, "It's about how you talk to yourself." Right. So, and he said to himself, you know, I prepare for these sort of things to happen, right? Wow. So, and he went through all the things that he could kind of tell himself instead of fixating on the injury, you know? And so that's a matter of catching his negativity if it goes down that road. Not that there's anything horrible or wrong, and, you know, don't think negative things, but reframing that.
Gotcha.
Like, oh yeah, it hurts. However he did it.
Gotcha.
You know, there's pain here. Well, how can we learn about what muscle needs to be? I don't know what he did, but
and that same methodology can be used for, you know, a lot of different things. I want to thank you guys for coming on the show. A lot of great things were said. I think. I personally have gained a better understanding of the concept. Guys at home that are watching this, make sure you subscribe and put comments. We always want to hear feedback. It helps us to, you know, construct the show and make things better, and just, you know, create a better dialogue about peace in general. I want to thank you guys for watching. Real peace, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.